Hi everyone, cheers. Got my Buffalo coffee cup from the Grand Canyon here with an extra strong brew of coffee on this rainy day. I knew I was going to need a little extra octane to be able to get through this video. There's a lot that I wanted to bring to your attention about this topic. The title is, Does JW.org see suicide as a recruitment opportunity? And my personal opinion is that they do. So why do I feel that way? Well, first of all, let's take a look at the source material that's posted on JW.org. I'd like to review the document that they put up, and then I'll share some commentary afterward. So let's give that a look. On JW.org, there's a menu on the top menu that says About Us. If we click on that and go to Activities, what caught my eye recently under Activities of Jehovah's Witnesses is an article entitled The Campaign That Saved Lives. And it talks about in 2017, Jehovah's Witnesses in the southeastern section of Mexico, in the Tabasco state of Mexico, made a special campaign to redistribute a 2014 issue of the Awake magazine, and they did this last year in 2017. This Awake magazine had a subject of Why Go On? 3 Reasons to Keep Living. This was a campaign that this article goes into detail about some examples of witnesses reaching out to the community, this community that has been ravaged by suicide. And it talks about the witnesses, the individual witnesses. There's a couple named, Faustino and Carla, Miguel, etc., and mention their stories of being engaged in this campaign of helping others to go on because of the contents of this Awake magazine, and that some of the people who received this Awake magazine felt that it was God's answer to their prayers, and they even went to prisons, for an example, to be able to talk to these folks about suicide. And it says at the end that the campaign did not go unnoticed. The state secretary of health congratulated the witnesses for their efforts to help the community, and a local newspaper published an article in the campaign entitled, They Go Out to Fight Suicide. So apparently it was a very successful campaign that was recognized by the state secretary of health. There's all kinds of thoughts that I have about reading this article, and I'm going to try to get into them as logically as I can, and I want to try to organize my thoughts here. And the first thing that I'd like to address, let me start by taking it completely on face value. After reading this article, I just chose to double check that actually happened. So I went to the National Institute of Health for Mexico, and I took a look. Is there a higher incidence of suicide in this particular region? And sure enough, there was an article posted on the Mexican Institute of Health indicating that in this particular region there was a much higher statistical likelihood of the occurrence of suicide. It actually went into quite a bit of detail as far as which demographic had the most incidents of suicide attempts. Was it young folks? Was it older people? Was it male? Was it female? What was the method of suicide used? And to spare you any of the real gory details, one of the things it mentioned is there seems in that particular region of the country to be a preponderance of hangings. And the website, the Mexican website, does seem to indicate some reasons why they feel that would be the case. So could you imagine on the face value that a religious organization within the community, that it's come to their attention that there is a higher rate of suicide within the communities where their adherents live? Let's do an outreach to the community and let's see if we can help. I think that's a very admirable thing. And I think there would be some ways for any organization to reach out and fill a need within the community. I don't think that this article spells out the best response to this need within a community. So, in no particular order, I'd like to offer just my own opinion about what I thought about when I saw this article. And the first thing is a concept of, let's just say that witnesses were doing a great work and they were filling a need within the community. Why would you have to put an article out about this? Why would you have to be blowing your own horn and using this as a PR article? If you did something good, isn't the fact that you did something good well enough? Isn't that reward in and of itself? Why would you post that on your website saying, see and look at how good we are. Look at this great thing that we did. Because that seems to go counter to a lot of the counsel that witnesses will give when you read their literature, when you go to their meetings, or when you look at their website. They have given counsel that completely counters the action that they just did. They're blowing a horn, touting how wonderful it is that they did a work like this. So let me just show you one of the easiest articles for me to find on jw.org that counsels against doing exactly what we just saw. Let's give that a look. In the Watchtower of February the 15th, 2009, there's an article, Let Jesus' Sayings Affect Your Attitude. So this was studied just a few years ago, 2009, but it's still current, and it's talking about the Sermon on the Mount, about what Jesus' sayings are. And if we go down to, let's see here, paragraph 18 has a subheading, Do not blow a trumpet ahead of you. Take good care not to practice your righteousness in front of men in order to be observed by them. Otherwise, you will have no reward with your Father who is in the heavens. By righteousness, Jesus meant conduct that conforms to the divine will. It says, but we will have no reward from our Heavenly Father if we do things in order to be observed and admired. If we have such motives, we will not enjoy a close relationship with God or the eternal blessings of kingdom rule. In paragraph 19, it says, again, continuing the quote of Jesus, hence, when you go making gifts of mercy, do not blow a trumpet ahead of you, just as the hypocrites do in the synagogues and in the streets, that they may be glorified by men. Truly I say to you, they are having the reward in full. So the Watchtower editorial on this is, we are not to publicize such giving as the Pharisees did. Jesus called them hypocrites because they advertised their charitable donations in the synagogues and in the streets. Those hypocrites were having their reward in full. Jehovah would give them nothing. How, though, are Christ's disciples to act? Paragraph 20 of this article says, again going back to the quote of Jesus, your gifts of mercy may be in secret. Then your Father who is looking on in secret will repay you. And Watchtower's comment is, we do not advertise our charitable deeds, even to those as close to us as our left hand is to our right hand. I know full well that there's probably not a whole lot of active Jehovah's Witnesses that are watching a video such as this. But if there is, I'm sure that one of the first things that they would think is, I'm being unreasonable by saying that. Curtis, we're not blowing a trumpet ahead of ourselves. We're just, it's just an awareness thing. That's why we posted it on jw.org. It's your prerogative to have that opinion. I'm just saying, personally, the first thought I had when I read that article is, what a bunch of public relations this is. On face value, if you were doing a religious, or you were doing an outreach to the community and you're a religious organization and you wanted to reach out to people who were putting their own welfare at risk by considering suicide, and you wanted to raise awareness of the problem, I think that's admirable. I don't think there's anything wrong with that whatsoever. But to do it and then put an article on your website saying, see how great it is, and look at, even the State Secretary of Health said that, wow, this is a wonderful thing that they did, I think that that's where you overstep. And when I take a look at an article like that one that you put in the Watchtower, where it reads from the Sermon on the Mount, and it's a very simple concept put in the Sermon on the Mount, if you're going to do something good, and that is reward in and of itself. Don't go out there and blow a trumpet. Don't make a big deal and try to draw attention to the fact that you did it, because I think at that point it becomes unchristian. And that's the very first thought I had when I watched that. It just seemed that it was very self-congratulatory, and it seemed that it was something that it did not reflect an attitude that I think is the attitude that's preached by witnesses. So that's the first thing that made me uncomfortable. And the second thing is, this is not just an idea that some publisher or some pioneer or some congregation had. A rank and file member of the organization cannot in and of themselves devise a campaign like that. They can't just read in a newspaper and say, oh, this is a problem facing our community. You know what, we had an article recently about this. Let's print up some extra copies and let's have a campaign to go out there and spread this message within the community. That does not happen on the local level. That does not happen on the individual witness level. That takes coordination. That takes coordination from the local branch to be able to print and make these articles available. This takes specific instruction throughout the congregations in this particular region that this is something that we as an organization are going to focus our efforts on during this month or during however long this campaign lasted. So this is something that took concerted effort all the way coming through, and it had to start at the branch level. So even if it didn't start at the branch level, it certainly had to have the blessing of the branch level to be able to coordinate this and make those additional issues available. But then the next thing is that I wanted to think about is this must have been some really, really useful information. This Awake magazine must have really had some very concrete suggestions, some offers of help that were going to have that type of effect. So I decided to take a look. What was that? I believe it was April 2014. What was the contents of that magazine? What was it that was being said to the members of that community in Tabasco State in Mexico? What was being said that had such a huge impact? Let's take a look at that, shall we? If we scroll back up to the top, we can actually, there's a link within the article. You can click where it says Why Go On, which is the April 2014 issue of The Awake. If we click on that, let's see what these 3 reasons are to keep on living. Let's see, have you or someone you know thought about suicide? Finding a reason to live can make all the difference. It looks like the cover subject, Why Go On, is the title. And like you would expect from an Awake magazine, the names have been changed with the characters, but they give an example of some people who suffer from depression, some people who say that I couldn't go on, and then they quote some statistics from an outside source. Let's take a look at these 3 reasons to keep living. Reason number 1, because things change. Suicide has been called a permanent solution to a temporary problem. Tackle your problems one day at a time. What if your circumstances can't change? For an example, a chronic illness. Even in such cases, there is something you can change, which is your outlook on the situation. Remember, you can't scale a mountain in a single step. However, you can take the challenge one step at a time. What you can do today, talk to someone, a friend or a family member about your situation. You can open up the Bible and read accounts of faithful people who suffered despair, like Rebecca, Moses, Elijah, and Job, and read those accounts. The second thing a person that's considering suicide could do, reason number 2, because there is help. You can throw all of your anxiety on God, it mentions, by using prayer. It's very important here under prayer that we use his name Jehovah. Apparently that's a special incantation that we can use in our prayers. Prayer is an avenue of communication that can be available anytime, anywhere. People who care. There's a subtitle here that say that your life matters to other. People who care might be your family, but people who care also include some whom you have never met. For an example, Jehovah's Witnesses encounter distraught people, some of whom have admitted that they were desperate for help and had considered ending their life. The door-to-door ministry has given Jehovah's Witnesses a unique opportunity to help such people. Jehovah's Witnesses care about their fellow man. They care about you. And then after that, it talks about, in a passing glance, about professional assistance, that suicidal thoughts often indicate the presence of a mood disorder like clinical depression. There's nothing to be ashamed of if you suffer from an emotional illness, any more than if you suffered from a physical illness. Remember, it's not possible to climb out of a deep pit of depression by yourself. With a helping hand, you can succeed. Seek out a reputable physician who treats mood disorders such as depression. Okay, so that was argument number 2, because there's help. And the third one is because there is hope. And this is where we have a variety of Bible passages that God intends something better. God intends there to be a paradise. The fulfillment of that promise is a certainty based on the Scripture and Revelation. It's key to remember that although your emotions may toss and turn like a boat on a turbulent sea, the Bible message can anchor you. Start investigating what the Bible teaches about a genuine hope for the future. Jehovah's Witnesses will be glad to help you. You can contact them locally or find valuable information at their website, jw.org. And there we have the end of the recruitment. Further in the same article, can the Bible help me if I'm depressed? And there are scriptures quoted that God is a God of comfort. God gives strength. He gives good examples of people who have despaired in the past, and he gives hope for the future. If we continue on in the same article in 2014 or in the same issue, it says, we do not, however, endorse any specific medical treatment. We feel that each person should make his own decision on such matters. That's very big, magnanimous of them. Let's click on depression, how to treat it. And again, we have a first-person story of someone named Ruth who had depression for many years. She thought she found an effective medication with her doctor and was doing better. Love of her husband helped. Let's see what else we have here. Some helpful options. There are a number of treatments for depression. Many people have been helped by their physician, but some need more specialized treatment. Antidepressants, some other form of assistance, herbal medications, dietary adjustments, or controlled exercise. Common issues, let's see what we have here. Well-meaning friends with little or no medical training might try to tell you which method of treatment to accept and which to reject. Make sure that any advice you accept comes from a reliable source. In the end, you are the one who must make an informed choice. It talks also about discouragement. A good program of medical therapy is more likely to succeed if there's good communication between doctor and patient. Let's see, overconfidence is spoken about. Once somebody starts to feel better, they may stop their remedy. What kind of depression is there? So it talks about major depression, bipolar disorder, dysthymia, postpartum depression, seasonal affective disorder. So it talks about there's a variety of different depressions. Apparently they all can't be treated the same. Let's go to the next page of this article. Help from the God of Comfort. It has some quotes from King David in the Psalms. David certainly had a lot to be depressed about based on some of the things he did, for certain. The subheading is God accessible to the depressed. He is. It says Jehovah is near to those broken at heart. How can the depressed get comfort from God? He is the hearer of prayer. What if feelings of unworthiness make us think that our prayers are not being heard? God remembers that we are dust. God is greater than our hearts and knows all things. What if we are too distraught to put our feelings into words? The Father of tender mercies and God of all comfort is mentioned. How does God answer our prayers? The Bible does not suggest that God removes all our difficulties now. However, God does impart the strength to cope with all things, which includes depression. The Scriptures are a vital source of spiritual strength to help affected individuals cope with depression. But here is the tagline, no more depression ever. The Bible reveals that God's purpose is to remove all distressing conditions that contribute to depression. And this is something interesting I thought at the bottom of the page. There's a sidebar here about speak consolingly to the depressed. And it says that when Barbara's depression and feelings of worthlessness are more than she can bear, she and her husband phone Gerard, a family friend who is a Christian overseer. He always listens patiently as Barbara sobs uncontrollably and repeats the same anguished thoughts that she has expressed before. Gerard has learned to listen without being judgmental, argumentative, or condemning. As the Bible advises, he has learned to speak consolingly to the depressed. Patiently, he reassures Barbara that she's very precious to Jehovah. He usually reads 1 or 2 comforting passages from the Bible, even though he has read some of them to her before. Oh, Barbara, you do test Gerard's patience, don't you? Then, without fail, he offers to say a prayer with her and her husband over the phone, something they always find consoling. Gerard is very aware that he is not a trained physician, and he never tries to take over the role of Barbara's doctors. So Gerard is not a trained physician. That is certainly true. He does, however, complement her medical treatment with something few doctors give: consoling scriptures and comforting prayers. So you might say to somebody who is depressed, "I wanted to let you know that I've been thinking of you." You might say, "I'm amazed at what you are able to do despite your health limitations." There's some reminders here. Be compassionate and kind. You might say, "I came across this encouraging scripture," or "I thought of you when I reread this favorite Bible verse of mine." Please avoid a preachy tone. And then we have some consolation from the scriptures where different individuals are quoted apparently as saying, "This is my favorite verse," or "my favorite verse that gives me some comfort." Interesting. It wasn't my intention initially to do a paragraph-by-paragraph analysis of this magazine from the 2014 Awake, and then to follow the links associated with other content on jw.org. But the reason I decided to do that is because I think that fundamentally this belies a pivotal misunderstanding on the part of the writing staff and the editorial staff of the Awake magazine. You are not a reliable source for information when it comes to this. Suicide is not a spiritual problem. Depression is not a spiritual problem that can be studied away. Yes, there might be some passages in the Bible that can be faith-affirming, that can console people. But fundamentally, this is a problem that requires professional help. Professional help is not going to be found by the leadership of your local congregation and the elders. As well-meaning as they may be, they are helpless when it comes to dealing with suicide and people who are medically depressed. Any of those topics, any of those categories of depression that were listed within this magazine require professional help. And in all those page after page and paragraph after paragraph, 4 sentences referred to seeking professional or medical help. That is woefully inadequate to the topic at hand. So therefore, when I read a self-congratulatory bit of public relations nonsense, like this article on jw.org, saying how wonderful we are, you have in fact done a disservice to the community that you serve. How irresponsible is it for the editorial staff of the Awake magazine to suggest, not only in this article, but in any article, that when 2 witnesses knocked on the door with a piece of literature, a householder felt that their prayers had been answered and God had directed them. That is ridiculously irresponsible to suggest in print, ever, that the arrival of 2 witnesses on the doorstep of any householder could be considered God directing them. Because what happened to all the hundreds or thousands or millions of other people who might have prayed to God and didn't have a piece of literature arrive hand-delivered on their doorstep? Why were they not worthy of an answer? What of a spouse that is undergoing physical abuse? What of a child that's undergoing physical or sexual abuse? What if somebody who was a loved one did in fact successfully commit suicide? What about their prayers? So to suggest in an article like this, even if it was from the perspective of the householder and at their own words, it's irresponsible to print that. And you know better than that. I'm just disgusted in seeing this article and in reading this article, because suicide can't be studied away. It's not a question of praying more or using Jehovah's name in a prayer versus not using Jehovah's name in a prayer. Anybody who is has in a frame of mind where suicide is the only solution that they can see to stop the pain that they're dealing with on a daily basis needs professional help. There's no indication that JW.org in that Mexican state of Tabasco set up a hotline or opened the doors of their local kingdom hall to anybody who had suicidal thoughts, or had any type of practical advice as far as, let's take anything in your home that could help you in suicide and let's remove it from your home. Let's have regular visits with you to check in to see how you're doing. Let's help you get to a clinic if you need to get to a clinic. Those are practical things to be done. To take a piece of literature and to reprint it in literature that's superficial at the very, very best in its approach to suicide, and to hand it out with the community to say, here's a piece of literature, fling, and to throw that at the public as if that's supposed to be some type of answer. It makes you feel good, I'm sure. Obviously, it makes you feel good because you felt good enough about it to put your article on jw.org. But as far as actually helping people, woefully inadequate. The reason that I get so worked up about this is because over the course of my life, I've known people that are very close to me that have wrestled with suicidal thoughts. And when I read an article like this, I can tell that this article is a PR gimmick to try to recruit people to study with witnesses. Because once somebody becomes a witness and they manifest any of these suicidal thoughts or depressive thoughts, you know what other witnesses react to? Oh, you know what? They must have a problem with their faith. I'm not going to spend too much time getting too close to them because their negative emotions might rub off on me, because they're somehow not exercising enough faith, and that's why they have these negative emotions, this depression, these suicidal thoughts. When I was a ministerial servant, and I knew other ministerial servants or elders or book study conductors, these are well-meaning men that have absolutely no qualifications whatsoever to be counseling anybody when it comes to something as serious as suicide. These are people who, for a vocation and for a living, are not in the mental health field. Why on earth would you listen to their advice when it comes to something that's a matter of life and death? What can you do today? Today. That was one of the topics in the article. What can you do today? And the answer was, study the Bible with jw.org or Jehovah's Witness. Because these witnesses that, they care about you. You might not even know who they are, but they care about you. They don't care about you. Not when it comes to what it's really going to take to care for somebody who's suicidal. They might have a passing motivation that they care for their neighbors. It sounds great to say I care for my neighbors, but what we're seeing here on jw.org is a recruitment tool for a high control group, nothing else. And then another thought that I had in reading this article was this idea of, as part of this campaign, witnesses went to prisons and they witnessed to people who are incarcerated. I really wish that the witnesses didn't do this, because they've already proven on a day in and day out basis in one country, in one region after another, that they do not have policies in place right now today to adequately protect members of their congregations. When you actually go to prisons and recruit from prisons people who are incarcerated and in prisons can smell a mark a mile away. And so here they have these people that are coming to the prison. And a prisoner, and some prisoners that are incarcerated for some terrible crimes, can see, you know what, all I have to do is follow this course of study And when I get out, I can be welcome in this community of fellow believers. And I can have access to all these easy marks, these people who are trusting people, who throw their doors open, throw their arms open to me. Witnesses, wake up. You're inviting people who were criminals in prisons to be baptized members of your congregation, and then you wonder why there's problems in your congregation about child sexual abuse, and it's a paradise for anybody who is incarcerated, for anybody who has bad motives, to see these sheep, these marks are coming to them and recruiting them at prisons. It's just, it's mind-boggling that this is ever done. So I know that I'm probably more emotional than I have been on any of my other videos, and it's because things like this are maddening to me. So when I read Combating Cult Mind Control, and I see from Stephen Hessen's work about how other groups have tried to see a marketing opportunity in the most vulnerable members of society, and I look at jw.org and I read this article that was recently posted, and I see exactly the same. When they look at a particular region and they say, oh, there's a problem here with suicide, much beyond the demographics that are typical within a region. What a great marketing opportunity. Let's throw a piece of literature at the public. And our work here is done. We're not actually solving the problem. We're not concretely or fundamentally doing anything with our community to lessen the chances that suicide would happen. As a matter of fact, they're making the problem worse because they're not recognizing it for what it is. They're recognizing it fundamentally as a spiritual problem that can be prayed away or studied away, and it's a recruitment opportunity for jw.org. Don't take my word for it. I'm just sharing with you what my opinion is after reading this article. If this is something that has piqued your interest, I would love to hear what your comments are about this. If it's something that you agree with, share it. Let other people know about this. Read the article. Read that landmark 2014 Awake magazine about suicide. Come to your own conclusions. I'd like to know what you think about this topic. In the meantime, take some deep breaths and try to get myself into a better place. But thank you so much for your time today.